Today's recipe is a caramelised onion tart. So we're going to use filo pastry, which we've done in the past with the fats and oils module, but the focus today is going to be on the onions. So we're going to look at caramelisation of a savoury product. So within the onions we have something what we call intrinsic sugars, and they are sugars that are within the cells of the onion, and when heat is applied, if it's heat like sautéing or frying or roasting, those sugars are released and they start to caramelise, and that turns what can be quite a spicy, almost bitter onion flavour into a very, very sweet caramelised flavour. So we're going to prepare the onions first before adding them onto the tart, and then obviously baking in the oven. The recipe is just onion and cheese. The cheese that can be used would be goat's cheese, you can use halloumi, you can use mozzarella, you could even just put cheddar on it. It's just the way that you want to actually present it. Goat's cheese looks amazing, but people don't like the taste of it sometimes. I'm using mozzarella, quite a child-friendly recipe, and I'm introducing cherry tomatoes to add that sweetness to mine as well. That's an added optional ingredient. So we have the filo pastry. So filo pastry is like paper thin, very, very delicate, cracks very easily. We're building it up with layers, so if there are pieces that crack, as long as we're overlapping them, the tart will still work. Biggest thing with filo pastry is to add a little bit of a glaze to it so that it starts to brown. So I'm going to do that with some melted butter today. And then, as I said, I've got onions, tomatoes, mozzarella. I've got the butter, which I'm going to melt as a glaze. And I've got some oil as well, which we're going to use to start caramelising the onions. The first thing to do is to prepare the vegetables so that they are done. Whilst the onions are caramelising, it needs to be a slow and steady process. We don't want to burn them, so we want it on a lower heat than normal. So normally when we're frying, we're on 4 or medium heat. Get it up to that stage, but then we're going to turn that down. While that's being done, I will construct the rest of the tart and show you. So all of the tomatoes are going to be cut just in half. So I'm going to do it lengthways so that they sit as flat as possible. So I'll do all of that in a second. And then the onion, we are going to do it in the rainbow slices. So the onion, it does say 2 on the recipe. You can see my onion is huge. So I'm just going to use half. So I'm using a bridge hold, but obviously trying to really grip that onion as I go around because it's so large. And then we're going to remove the outer layers. So I've cut the top of the onion off. So I've kept the stalk on the bottom. If you are unsure, then there is an onion tutorial that you can search under my channel to watch that just to make sure that you're doing it correctly. Peeling off that outer layer, and then that onion, we are ready to do the rainbow slices. So claw grip, and we want to cut them rather thin so that they soon fall, and then they'll be easier to go onto the tartlet. So we're looking, it's a slightly skew-whiffy rainbow because it's got the 2 layers inside, but you're looking for slices like so. So I'm going to prepare all of those, and then we'll go on to frying and caramelising the onions and preparing the tartlet. I'm now going to start caramelising the onions. So we're going to add the oil into the pan first of all, so about a tablespoon of oil. What we do want to make sure is that there's enough what we call cooking accelerant into that pan for the conduction process so that the onions don't stick to the bottom. We don't want to dry fry this, we're sautéing, so we're using a cooking accelerant to cook those onions through, making sure they don't stick and don't burn. I'm going to add the onions in, break them up as you go along so that you're really spreading all those onions around the pan. As I said, I've put it onto a medium heat to start with, but once that starts to sizzle and those intrinsic sugars will start to be released through that process of caramelisation, then I'm going to turn that heat down and allow it to just fry slowly. Whilst that's doing, I'm going to prepare the pastry. So I'm just going to move my ingredients to one side, and then I will show you how we do the filo, which has been covered up because it does dry out really, really quickly. Mine's actually been frozen, so it's even more brittle, so we'll move on. So as we start with the pastry, we're going to go onto a baking tray, so just a flat baking tray, and we're going to add on our first layer. So as I said, a couple of my layers are cracked because of it being in the freezer. So we're going to start with a full layer on the bottom. Start with that layer, make sure that it's the size of your baking tray, so I'm just going to trim each of my layers as I go along to ensure that it fits in. You can do these individually as well, so you can cut them into smaller squares if you've got time on your hands. And then we are going to brush each one with the butter, which I'll just melt quickly in the microwave. So about 30 seconds to melt and brush, and then we'll build up the layers and add on the ingredients. The onions, as I'm doing this now, are just starting to get some colour on them. So just keep moving them around. We don't want them to go black at all. We don't want to produce carbon. Carbon is what adds a bitterness to the flavour of any product. So if you do burn a product, the black parts are carbon, and that's what can end up affecting and tainting the flavour of your food. So just wanting them to go a golden colour. Obviously, because I'm using a red onion, to have a purple tinge to them. When we're doing each layer, we're going to add this butter to really crisp the pastry up so that we have that really nice flaky, crunchy texture to the base of our tart. So one layer brushed with butter, next layer on top. Just need to trim a little bit. Doing this with each one. You want to finish if you can. If yours are broken, like a couple of mine are, and you will find they do break quite easily, you can just add broken layers in between and just slightly overlap them. So these two are snapped. So I'm going to add butter to those and then put another layer on. I would aim for 5 layers, not too many more than that. They can get a little bit too dry then. Stirring my onions so that I don't get them too brown. Obviously the oven will continue to caramelise them, so I'm going to take that off the heat now just while I add these last couple of layers on. Trimming down and brushing. And then what we want to do is end up with a crust, so you don't want to put all of your ingredients right the way up to the edge. We want a little bit of a crust, as like a tart, like a pizza, that sort of thing. So that's all of my pastry now in place, and I'm going to scatter tomatoes all around. So I've just cut the tomatoes. These are an added extra to this recipe. You can add these, you could also roast some red peppers, pop those on as well. Lots of different vegetables you can use. I've got mozzarella pearls, so these are just the little balls of mozzarella just to, again, ease of scattering. So I'm going to add those all the way around as well, popping those in place, and then we're going to finish with our caramelised onions, and we're just going to place those scattered on top of the cheese and of the tomatoes. They've got a lovely smell to them from that caramelised texture and appearance. It smells amazing as well. Pop them on all the way around, and this is an excellent way to demonstrate caramelisation in a savoury product. So we could also do a onion soup, so we really caramelise white onions in that case usually, and you caramelise them down and then obviously add them into a liquid with a stock. That can go into the oven. The other thing I'm going to add onto this actually now, which I had forgotten, is some mixed herbs. So you could put thyme on here, you can put basil, oregano. I'm going to put some fresh parsley on mine once it's cooked, because the parsley and basil tend to go black in the oven, so you want to put those on fresh at the end. So that will now go into a preheated oven at 190 gas mark 5 for about 15 minutes, and I'll take it out at the end to show you the completed product.